Diane Moreau did not look up when she slid the form back across the counter. That was the first thing Funke noticed, not the rejection itself, but the fact that Diane had barely glanced at it. The form was still warm from Funke's hands. She had filled it out carefully, block letters, the way she always wrote when she was tired and her handwriting started to slope. Her name, her daughter's name, the temperature reading she had taken with the drugstore thermometer on the bus ride over, 103.8 Fahrenheit. She had underlined it, twice. Diane looked up once, just long enough to register the picture. A woman in PSW scrubs, a worn winter coat, an old kente bag slung over one shoulder, and a small child on the plastic chair behind her, slumped against the wall, cheeks flushed brick red, eyes half closed. Then Diane looked back at her screen. We're appointment only. You'll want to try the walk-in on Dundas West. They take same-day cases. The walk-in on Dundas West was 40 minutes away by TTC. Funke knew because she passed it every morning on her way to her first shift, had passed it for 3 years, and she also knew it had a 2-hour minimum wait on weekday afternoons. This was a Wednesday. It was 2:14 in the afternoon, and Zara had not kept down water since breakfast. My daughter has a fever of 103.8, Funke said. She's 7. I'm not asking for anything except for someone to look at her. Without an appointment. Can I make one for right now? Diane's fingers paused over the keyboard, a pause that lasted exactly long enough to communicate that she had considered it and decided against it. Our next available is Thursday at 4. Funke turned and looked at Zara. The little braids her father had done Sunday morning were coming undone at the ends, tiny beads sliding loose. Zara's head had tilted to one side. Her lips were dry. She can't wait until Thursday, Funke said. Then I'd suggest the sick kids' emergency room. They're equipped for pediatric cases. The sick kids' ER was on University Avenue, on a Wednesday afternoon in January, with flu season already moving through every classroom in the city. The wait would be 4 hours, minimum, and that was if they got there before 3 o'clock, which they would not, because by the time they reached the bus stop on the corner and waited and transferred, it would be closer to 4. And Funke's second shift started at 6. And her supervisor had already called twice. She did not say any of this. She picked the form back up off the counter, folded it in half, and put it in her bag. She walked back to the plastic chair beside Zara and sat down. She placed her hand against her daughter's forehead, still burning, and said quietly in Yoruba, "Mowa nibi, Mama wa, I'm here, Mama is here." Zara's eyes fluttered. The rest of the waiting room continued around them, indifferent, fluorescent, the way waiting rooms always are. If you have ever sat in a room while someone looked right through you, stay with me. Because what is about to happen in this clinic, in this very lobby, is something you will not forget. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because the woman sitting in that plastic chair with the kente bag is not who Diane thinks she is, not even close. Funke Adeyemi came to Canada from Lagos in the winter of 2013. She was 22 years old. She had one suitcase, a folder of documents she had memorized cover to cover, and a bag her mother had pressed into her hands at Murtala Muhammad Airport just before the security line. The bag was old even then, kente cloth, bright strips of orange and gold and forest green, woven tight and close, the kind of weaving that took 3 days and left calluses on the palms. Her mother had bought it at a Lagos market from a Ghanaian trader who had carried it from Kumasi. It was not fashionable. It had a small tear along the left strap that her mother had mended with embroidery thread, the same thread she used for school uniforms. "This bag will carry everything you need," her mother said. "Not this bag is beautiful. Not people will admire you when you carry it. Just what is inside matters, not what it looks like outside." Funke had nodded, the way you nod at a mother's wisdom when you are 22 and think you already understand things. She did not understand yet. Understanding came later, slowly, over 11 years of shifts that started at 5 in the morning and ended at 11 at night, of learning to do 2 things at once and then 3, of sending money home every month until the amounts got smaller, and then, for a while, stopped, and then slowly climbed back up. She was a PSW now, a personal support worker. She cared for elderly clients in their homes across the east end of the city. She managed medications, sat with people who had outlived everyone they loved, and changed bandages with the steady hands of someone who had learned that care is not a feeling but a practice. She earned $19.50 an hour. She worked 40 hours a week at that job. She worked 12 more hours at a community health drop-in on College Street, which paid less and which she had almost quit twice and never quit because the people coming through that door needed the consistency. She had a 7-year-old daughter named Zara, whose father called every morning at 7 to say good morning. She had a 1-bedroom apartment in Scarborough that was tight but clean. She had one real winter coat, the one she was wearing now, a thrift shop find from 6 years ago on Bloor Street, and she intended to wear it through 6 more winters. She had other things too, but Diane could not see them from behind the reception desk. 3 years ago, the Rosedale Wellness and Primary Care Center had come within 30 days of closing. The building lease was up for renewal. The owner had raised the rent by 30%. The city's primary care funding had been cut. Dr. Nnamdi Okolo, the clinic's director, had sent 4 letters to the ward counselor. 3 got form responses. 1 got nothing at all. At the time, Funke had been volunteering at the College Street drop-in for 2 years. She attended a neighborhood association meeting one Thursday evening in February. She almost didn't go because Zara had a cold, and the meeting was at 7:30, and Funke had been awake since 4:45, and she heard Dr. Okolo speak. He spoke the way men speak when they have rehearsed something many times and still cannot make it sound like less than a crisis, because it is a crisis and rehearsal changes nothing. He said, "Without this clinic, the nearest primary care access for 600 underinsured residents in this neighborhood is a 45-minute transit ride. I don't know how to make that smaller. I just know it's true." Funke raised her hand. She was not on the agenda. She was not part of any organizing committee. She was a woman who had been awake since 4:45, whose daughter had a cold, who had taken the bus here in the dark. She said, "What would it take to keep the doors open for 1 year?" The number Dr. Okolo named was $180,000. What happened over the next 4 months was documented later, in a Toronto Star article, in a feature on CBC Radio's Metro Morning, in a framed certificate and a framed article that now hung on the wall beside the clinic's water fountain in the main corridor. But the facts were simple. Funke organized. She made calls. She went to every church, every mosque, every community center in a 12-block radius. She updated a spreadsheet on her phone during bus rides. She wrote the grant application herself at the kitchen table after Zara was asleep, between 11 at night and 1 in the morning. She held a fundraising dinner at a Ghanaian restaurant on Eglinton that raised $22,000 in one evening. She did all of it while working 2 jobs and raising a child and sending what she could home to Lagos. The clinic raised $183,000. It renewed its lease. It stayed open. There was a framed Toronto Star article on the wall just inside the main corridor of the clinic, past the reception desk, past the triage station, where the hallway widened and the light was better. The headline read, "Community Organizer Saves Rosedale Clinic from Closure." Below the headline was a photograph, Funke Adeyemi in a blue dress holding a ceremonial check, smiling the kind of smile that costs more than people can see. The article had been on that wall for 2 years and 8 months. Diane Moreau walked past it 4 times a day. She had never read it, not once. By 2:40 in the afternoon, Zara's temperature had climbed. Funke knew without a thermometer. She knew by the way Zara's breathing had gotten shorter, by the way the child had stopped answering questions and had started leaning into her mother with the particular heaviness of a feverish body that has given up fighting and is just resting. She went back to the desk. "My daughter's temperature is going up. I can feel it. I'm asking again, can someone please look at her?" Diane glanced past Funke at Zara, at the scrubs, at the bag, back at her screen. "Ma'am, if you feel it's a genuine emergency, you should be at a hospital, not a wellness center." "I helped keep this clinic open," Funke said. Her voice was level. 3 years ago, I organized the fundraising campaign that renewed this lease." Diane blinked. Something moved through her expression. Not quite disbelief, more the look of someone who has been handed a piece of information with no folder to put it in. "I'm sure you did, ma'am. the tone of someone who is certain you did not. But our intake policy applies equally to everyone. Equally. The word settling in the room the way it always settles when it is being used to justify something that is not equal at all. Funke took a breath. She turned around and walked back to Zara. Taiwo Badamosi was 23 years old, studying pre-health at U of T Scarborough, and doing a placement at the clinic every Wednesday afternoon, filing, front desk support, vitals, whatever was needed. She was paid nothing. She did it for the clinical hours and because her mother had told her that a person who wants to work in healthcare had better understand first what it costs to receive it. She had been watching from the filing alcove behind the reception desk since Funke first walked in. She had grown up in a house where her mother said, "When you see someone struggling and you do nothing, you are telling God you don't need anyone to help you either." Funke was not much older than Taiwo, maybe 8 years, but the principle did not require age, and Zara was a child, and Taiwo had eyes. She went to the supply closet. She got a forehead thermometer. She filled 2 paper cups at the water cooler. She walked out to the waiting room and crouched in front of Zara's chair. "Hi, my name is Taiwo. Can I check how warm you are?" Zara looked at her with the blurred tolerance of a child too tired to object. Taiwo pressed the thermometer gently to her forehead. The number appeared in 2 seconds. 104.1. Taiwo kept her face still. She wrote the number in her notebook. She handed the second cup of water to Funke. "I'm just a placement student," she said quietly. "I can't do anything official, but I want you to know I see you, and I'm going to try something." Funke looked at this young woman, box braids, tired eyes, a U of T lanyard, a notebook she was gripping like it mattered. She thought of herself at 23, in a different waiting room, in a different city, holding a different folder. "Thank you," Funke said. "What's her name?" "Zara." "Okay, Zara." Taiwo touched the back of the child's hand. "You're going to be okay." She stood up. She walked back toward the corridor. She did not go back to the filing alcove. She walked past the triage station. She walked past the water fountain. She stopped in front of the framed Toronto Star article on the wall. She looked at the photograph. She looked back at the waiting room. She looked at the photograph again. Then she pulled out her phone. She typed a message to the one number she had been told to use only for genuine clinical concerns, the number that went directly to Dr. Okolo's desk on the second floor. "Dr. Okolo, I think the woman who saved this clinic 3 years ago is in our waiting room with her sick daughter and she's been turned away. I'm sorry to use this line." I didn't know what else to do. She pressed send. Then she stood very still and waited to see whether she had just destroyed her placement. Dr. Nnamdi Okolo had been at this clinic for 11 years. He had built it from a single-room operation in a strip mall on Mount Pleasant Road into a full-service primary care center with 4 examination rooms, a part-time pediatric specialist, and a registered nurse on shift every weekday. He had survived 2 funding crises, 1 roof collapse, a pandemic, and more rounds of provincial policy changes than he could count. He was a deliberate man. He did not move quickly. He did not raise his voice. He had decided early in his career that panic was a luxury he could not afford, so he had simply stopped keeping any in reserve. When he read Taiwo's message, he stood up. He did not take the elevator. He took the stairwell at the end of the second-floor corridor, and the staff in the hallway who saw him push through the door at the bottom. White coat, stethoscope, reading glasses still on his face from whatever he had been reviewing, moved to the side without being asked, because the expression on his face said everything words couldn't. He turned the corner into the reception area. He saw Diane at the desk. He saw the waiting room. And in the corner, in one of the plastic chairs, he saw a woman in PSW scrubs, holding a small girl against her side. The child's cheek pressed against the woman's chest, the woman's hand moving slowly along her daughter's back. He knew her face before he was halfway across the room. Funke. She looked up. For a moment her face did something complicated, the contained expression she had been holding for the last hour shifting slightly, the way a wall shifts when something behind it finally moves. Dr. Okolo. He crossed to her in 4 strides. He crouched in front of Zara. He pressed 2 fingers gently to the inside of the child's wrist. He read the number Taiwo had written in the notebook on the chair. How long has she been at 104? At least 30 minutes. We've been here since just after 2. He stood. He was still for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turned toward the triage desk and said, with the particular quiet of a man who has finished deciding something, "Mariana, I need exam room 2, a pediatric kit, and someone on Zara's vitals right now." The triage nurse was already moving. He turned to the reception desk. Diane was watching. Diane. He said her name without heat and without any of the softness he might have used an hour ago. How long has this patient been in the waiting room? Diane's hands had gone still on the keyboard. She came in without an appointment. Our policy. I know our policy. How long has she been here? Since around 2:15. Nearly an hour. He let the number sit, with a child running a fever of 104. He paused. Funke told you about the fundraising campaign 3 years ago. Something moved through Diane's expression that she could not fully control. She mentioned it. I had no way to verify. Come with me. He walked toward the main corridor. After a moment, Diane followed. He stopped in front of the framed article on the wall. He waited. Diane looked at it. The headline, the photograph. The woman in the blue dress holding the ceremonial check, smiling. Diane looked back toward the waiting room, where the woman in the PSW scrubs was now being escorted with her daughter toward the examination rooms. The same woman, the same face. Her hand came up and covered her mouth. She organized the campaign that kept this clinic open, Dr. Okolo said. 4 months of work, 2 jobs, a child at home. She stayed until midnight the evening of the fundraising dinner helping clean up the restaurant. She has never asked for anything in return. He paused, until today, when she came in with a sick child and asked to be seen, and you redirected her to Dundas West. The corridor was quiet. Somewhere down the hall, Zara had started to cry, the low, exhausted crying of a child who is finally somewhere safe and can afford to let go. The sound moved through the space between them like something physical. I didn't know, Diane said. The words came out smaller than she intended. I know you didn't know. Dr. Okolo's voice remained the same. Steady, even. But Zara had a fever of 104 when she walked through our door and her mother told you. She didn't need you to recognize her name, Diane. She needed you to recognize that a child was sick. That should have been enough. It has always been enough. They kept Zara in exam room 2 for an hour. A respiratory infection, not flu, treatable, nothing that would not resolve with the right prescription and 2 days of rest. Dr. Okolo sat with Funke while the nurse completed the examination. He said very little. She said very little. Some rooms do not need words to fill them. When Zara had the prescription and a grape-flavored children's Tylenol and a sticker of a cartoon bear, Dr. Okolo walked Funke back to the corridor. Diane was there. She had not left. She was standing by the water fountain, and her posture was the posture of a person who has decided to remain somewhere uncomfortable because leaving would be the more dishonest choice. Funke looked at her. She had been thinking, in the examination room while Zara's breathing steadied, about her mother, about the airport in Lagos, about the bag slung now over her shoulder, worn at the straps, faded at the corners, still carrying everything she needed the way her mother had promised it would. She walked to where Diane was standing. Diane, not with anger, the way you say a name when you are about to say something true. Can I tell you something? Diane nodded, her eyes were red. When I came to this country, I was 22. I had 1 bag. Funke touched the strap of the kente bag. My mother gave it to me at the airport in Lagos. She said, "What's inside is what matters, not what it looks like outside." I was 22 and I thought I understood what she meant. She paused. It took me a long time to really understand. You learn it when people look at you and decide from the outside that the inside cannot possibly be worth their time. You learn it over and over. And eventually, if you're lucky, you stop needing them to see it. You just keep carrying it. She looked at Diane steadily. Diane did not look away. I'm not going to ask Dr. Okolo to do anything about your job. That's not what today is for. Funke paused. But I am asking you to remember the next time a mother comes through those doors carrying a sick child, whoever she looks like, whatever bag she's carrying, that there is no appointment system, no intake policy, No form in the world that should come before that. Not here. Not in any building. The door is for people who are hurting. That is the only thing the door is for. Diane pressed her lips together. Her mascara had tracked under both eyes. She nodded once, the slow, unceremonious nod of someone who has stopped performing and is just receiving. "I'm sorry," she said, quiet and unvarnished, the kind of sorry that costs something. Funke nodded. Then she looked down the corridor to where Taiwo was standing by the filing alcove, in her placement lanyard, holding her notebook and doing a poor job of pretending not to watch. Taiwo. Taiwo straightened immediately, the posture of someone whose name has just been called by a person who knows exactly what they did. "Come here, please." Taiwo walked over. She stood in front of Funke the way young people stand in front of someone they respect, when they are not yet sure what is about to happen. "You checked my daughter's temperature when no one asked you to," Funke said. "You wrote the number down. You got her water. You found a way to get help when you had no authority to do it. You did all of that as a 23-year-old placement student earning nothing." She paused. "What do you want to be?" "A doctor," Taiwo said. "Family medicine, maybe pediatrics." She said it the way you say something true that you are slightly afraid of. Funke looked at Dr. Okolo. He was already reaching into his breast pocket. "The Okolo Foundation funds 3 medical bursaries a year at U of T and McMaster," he said. "Full tuition, books, living expenses. We look for students who understand that medicine is about people before it is about systems." He handed his card to Taiwo. "Email me your transcript and a letter by the end of the month. Tell me what you wrote in that notebook today." Taiwo looked at the card, then at Funke. Then she did the thing young people do when they receive something they have wanted for a long time and did not expect today. She pressed her lips together hard and looked at the ceiling. "I'll write it," she managed. "Good." Dr. Okolo turned to leave, then he stopped. "And Taiwo, thank you for the text. You did the right thing." Taiwo exhaled, her whole body exhaled. Funke carried Zara out of the clinic at 4:17 in the afternoon. The sky over Rosedale had turned the flat gray of a January evening, and the street lamps on the block were already on. The cold was honest and clean, the kind of Toronto cold that doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. Zara was awake now, the medication already doing its work, one arm looped around her mother's neck, chin resting on Funke's shoulder. She was heavy with the weight of a child coming back to herself after a few frightening hours of feeling lost inside a fever. Funke stood on the sidewalk for a moment before walking to the bus stop. The Kent bag hung from one shoulder, old and faded and coming apart at one strap, and it held everything. The prescription, Zara's mittens, Funke's 2 phones, a thermos of tea now gone cold, a cup of grape juice the nurse had given Zara from the staff fridge. And at the bottom, under everything, folded in half and slightly creased, a Toronto Star article she had been meaning to mail to her mother in Lagos for 2 years and 8 months and had never gotten around to mailing. Her mother used to say it every morning before she walked out to the market. In Yoruba, in the flat, unhurried way of a woman who has said something so many times it has become part of her body. The child they teach will build their family home. The child they reject will be the one to build the house. Funke had been building things her whole life. Campaigns, networks, connections. This quiet, invisible architecture of care that nobody thinks to name until the building is already standing and they need it. She had built it in between shifts and after midnight, and on buses in the dark, and in a restaurant on Eglinton at midnight helping stack chairs. She had built it with the hands of a woman who was told, in 100 different ways, that she was not exactly the person this city had been designed for. And today she had walked into a building she helped keep standing, with her sick child, in her work clothes, carrying her mother's old kente bag, and she had been turned away, not because of anything she had done or failed to do, because of what she looked like, because of what she carried. The child they reject will build the house. The house was already built, it had been built for 3 years, and she had walked into it a stranger. She shifted Zara higher on her hip, pulled her collar up against the cold, and walked to the bus stop. The next bus came 7 minutes later, its lights cutting through the gray of the January evening like something dependable. She swiped her Presto card. She found 2 seats near the window. She settled Zara against her side. The city moved past the glass the way cities move when you are tired and your child is getting better, and the worst part of the day is behind you, block by block, ordinary and enduring. All of it held together by people whose names are not on any plaques and whose photographs hang in corridors that the wrong people walk past every day without reading. All of it held together by what you cannot see from the outside. That is what this story is, not the story of a building or a fundraising campaign or a framed article on a wall. It is the story of what a woman carried in an old kente bag across an ocean and kept carrying for 11 years because her mother told her, what is inside is what matters. And because a 23-year-old student in a placement, Lanyard looked at a photograph on a corridor wall and decided that what she saw mattered more than what the system said to do. And because that is always, in the end, how the house gets built, by the ones they turned away and by the ones who notice them when no one else will. The child they teach will build their family home. The child they reject will build the house. And from ancient African folktales, every story worth telling is a nest that someone built quietly over years while everyone else looked at the sky. We notice. We always will.